Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to our channel. I am so happy you are here today because you have chosen to listen to a story that is not only interesting, but will also help you learn English in a way that feels natural and enjoyable. Sometimes learning English can feel hard, and you may think, I will never be good at this. But I want you to believe something important. You can learn English. You can understand English. And one of the easiest ways to do it is by listening to simple, clear, and interesting stories. This is one of those stories. You will hear real English, the kind of English people use every day, but I will tell it in a way that you can understand. I will not speak too fast, and I will choose words carefully so that you can follow along. This way, you will learn without feeling stressed. Before we begin, let me remind you why learning English is so valuable. English is like a big door that opens to many opportunities in your life. With English, you can talk to people from many different countries. You can read books and watch movies that you could not understand before. You can travel more easily, and you can find better jobs. Even more, you can connect with the world. The internet is full of knowledge, and much of it is in English. If you can understand English, you can learn almost anything. That is why today's story is not just for fun, it is also a small step. In your journey to becoming confident with English, the story you are about to hear is called I Go to New York. It is about a trip I took, but more than that, it is about a dream I had for many years and how it felt when that dream became real. I will take you with me from the first moment I decided to go to New York, through the journey to get there, and into the streets, sounds, and smells of the city itself. You will see it through my eyes, and you will feel it with me. This will make your English learning stronger, because when you feel a story, you remember it. So, let's start. For a long time, New York was only a dream to me. I had seen it in movies and on television. I had seen pictures in magazines, the tall buildings that seemed to touch the clouds, the yellow taxis, the shining lights at night, the huge parks, and the famous bridges. It looked like a place full of life, energy, and endless stories. When I was younger, I thought maybe I would never go there. It seemed far away and almost like another world. But dreams have a way of staying in your mind. Even when you are busy with your daily life, they wait quietly, like seeds in the ground, until one day they begin to grow. For me, that day came when I realized that life is short and the world is big. I thought, if I do not go now, maybe I will never go. That thought stayed with me. I started looking at pictures of New York more often. I read about it. I imagined walking through its busy streets and feeling small but alive among so many people and buildings. One day, I made the decision. I told myself, I will go to New York. Saying those words out loud made my heart beat faster. Exciting, but also a little scary because it meant I had to make it real. The weeks after that were full of preparation. I had to save money, which meant working extra hours and saying no to things I usually spent money on. I started learning about flights, passports, and visas. I also thought about what I would take with me. I bought a good suitcase, one that was strong enough to travel across the world with me. I packed clothes for different kinds of weather, because I knew New York could be warm one day and cold the next. I put in a small notebook where I could write my thoughts and feelings during the trip. I also packed my camera, because I wanted to capture the moments and remember them forever. I practiced a little more English before the trip. I could already understand some, but I wanted to feel more comfortable speaking to strangers. Learned simple sentences that I might need for food, directions, and shopping. I told myself that even if I made mistakes, it would be okay, because speaking is the best way to learn. The night before my trip, I barely slept. I kept imagining what it would feel like to see New York with my own eyes. In the morning, I left. For the airport early, the taxi ride felt longer than usual, even though I was full of excitement. The driver asked where I was going, and when I said New York, he smiled and told me to enjoy the trip. At the airport, everything felt big. The crowd of travelers, the loud voices, the rolling suitcases. I checked my bag, went through security, and found my seat in the waiting area. All around me were people going to different places for different reasons. Some were happy, some looked tired, some looked nervous, and some looked like they had done this 100 times before. When it was time to board the plane, I walked down the long tunnel and stepped inside. The airplane was huge. I found my seat by the window and looked outside. Soon, the engines started to roar. The plane began to move, slowly at first, then faster and faster until the ground fell away and we were in the sky. Looking down, I could see my city getting smaller until it disappeared into the clouds. It was a strange feeling leaving everything I knew behind for something I had only imagined before. The flight was long. I watched movies, I ate the meals they gave us, and I looked out of the window at the endless white clouds. Sometimes I tried to sleep, but my mind was too full of thoughts. I kept picturing the moment I would step out into the streets of New York for the first time. I thought about the smell of the city, the sound of the traffic, the feeling of being surrounded by people from all over the world. Hours passed slowly, but finally the captain's voice came over the speaker to say we would soon be landing in New York. As the plane lowered, I looked out of the window and saw the city. It was even bigger than I expected. Buildings rose like mountains, bridges crossed wide rivers, and cars moved like tiny ants far below. The sunlight reflected off the glass towers, making them shine. My heart beat faster. We touched down with a small bump, and then we were rolling along the runway. I had arrived. Inside the airport, I followed the signs, went through immigration, and collected my bag. Then I stepped outside. The air felt cool and fresh, but also full of something else. A kind of energy that I had never felt before. Cars honked, people talked quickly, and I could hear the distant sound of a ferry horn from somewhere near the water. I took a yellow taxi and watched the city pass by through the window. There were so many tall buildings, food carts, shops, and people walking in every direction. When I reached my hotel, I checked in quickly, left my suitcase in the room, and went back outside. I wanted to feel the city right away. I walked for hours, seeing Central Park's green spaces surrounded by towers of glass and steel. Small shops next to giant stores, street performers playing music, and tourists taking photos. When I reached Times Square, the lights were brighter than I had imagined. Huge screens flashed advertisements, videos, and news. The air was full of the smell of food from carts and restaurants. I felt like a tiny part of something huge, and yet I felt alive. Even when night came, the city did not slow down. Lights reflected on the wet streets after a short rain. People laughed outside restaurants, taxis rushed past, and music came from somewhere in the distance. I bought a hot dog from a street cart, and the seller smiled, saying, "Welcome to New York." That simple sentence made me feel like I belonged there, even just for a moment. I walked back to my hotel, tired but full of energy inside. I knew this was only the beginning of my journey, and there was so much more to see and learn. The next morning began with the sound of the city waking up. Even before the sun had fully risen, I could hear the low rumble of buses, the steady hum of traffic, and the occasional shout from someone on the street below. I opened the curtains, and there it was, the view of a city already alive. Taxis moved like streams of yellow down the avenues, and people hurried along the sidewalks, coffee cups in hand, as if the day had already been going for hours. The air felt crisp and cool when I stepped outside, carrying that fresh morning energy that made me want to walk and explore without wasting a second. I decided to begin my day at Central Park again, but this time I would explore deeper. The moment I stepped inside, the city noise softened, replaced by the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Sunlight streamed through the branches, creating patterns on the path. There were runners passing me, people practicing yoga on the grass, and a man feeding pigeons who gathered around his feet without fear. I followed one winding path after another, passing small lakes where ducks floated peacefully and wooden benches where elderly couples sat, quietly enjoying the morning as I walked. I realized that Central Park was like a world inside another world. A place where you could forget for a moment that you were in one of the busiest cities in the world. At one point, I stopped at a small bridge that crossed a pond. The water reflected the trees and the clear blue sky above, and for a few minutes, I simply stood there, breathing in the calmness. I could have stayed all day, but New York has a way of pulling you forward, making you want to see what's next from the park. I wandered into the Upper East Side. The streets here were quieter, with elegant buildings, flower-filled balconies, and small cafes on the corners. I passed a bakery where the smell of fresh bread drifted into the street, and I couldn't resist going inside. The warmth of the place wrapped around me like a blanket, and the glass display was filled with croissants, muffins, and loaves of bread still steaming from the oven. I ordered a warm croissant and a coffee, and I sat by the window watching the street. People walked by in coats and scarves, some carrying grocery bags, others walking dogs. Everything felt peaceful, yet alive, a slower rhythm than the busy heart of the city. After breakfast, I made my way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The museum's steps were wide and grand, and I felt a little thrill just climbing them. Inside, the halls were filled with paintings, sculptures, and artifacts from all over the world. I wandered slowly, looking at works of art that had been created hundreds of years ago. Each piece told a story, some of kings and queens, others of ordinary life long ago. I didn't rush. I let each room pull me into its own world. There was something calming about walking through those quiet halls while outside the city rushed on. From there, I took a walk down Fifth Avenue. The street was lined with shops that sparkled with window displays, clothes, jewelry, and bright holiday decorations, even though it wasn't yet winter. I passed by St. Patrick's Cathedral, its tall spires reaching toward the sky, standing out among the modern glass buildings around it. I stepped inside for a few minutes, and the noise of the city vanished behind the heavy doors. The air was cool, the light dim except for the colors streaming through the stained glass windows, and the space felt peaceful in a way that made me forget the world outside. In the afternoon, I decided to try something new, riding the subway. The entrance was just a simple stairway leading underground. But the moment I stepped down, I entered another side of the city. The walls were lined with tiles, the air was warmer, and trains roared through the tunnels. People stood waiting, some reading books, some listening to music, some staring ahead with tired eyes. When the train arrived, the doors opened with a beep, and I stepped inside. It moved quickly, rocking slightly as it passed through the dark tunnels. In just a few stops, I was in another neighborhood entirely. I got off in Chinatown. The streets here were full of colorful signs, markets selling fresh vegetables and seafood, and the smell of spices in the air. I wandered through narrow lanes, where small shops sold everything from tea to hand-painted fans. The energy was different here, vibrant and full of life, with people chatting in different languages and bicycles weaving through the streets. I bought a small box of dumplings from a street vendor, and they were warm, soft, and full of flavor. I ate them as I walked, enjoying how each bite seemed to tell me a little more about the culture of the place. From Chinatown, I walked toward Little Italy. The streets here were lined with restaurants and cafes, many with tables outside under red, white, and green banners. The smell of pasta and garlic filled the air, and waiters stood outside inviting people in. I stopped at a small bakery and bought a slice of creamy cheesecake, which I ate slowly while watching the world go by. I noticed how in New York, every neighborhood had its own personality, its own sounds, smells, and colors, yet somehow they all fit together to make the city whole. By late afternoon, I decided to visit the High Line, a park built on an old railway line above the streets. Walking there felt different from the rest of the city. Plants grew along the path, and there were benches where people sat reading or talking. From above, I could see the streets stretching away in all directions, the traffic moving like rivers below. The view of the Hudson River glimmering in the sunlight was beautiful, and the cool breeze carried the scent of the water. As evening came, I made my way back toward Times Square. The closer I got, the more the streets began to glow with lights. Times Square at night was like standing in the middle of a giant screen, colors and images flashing all around. People from every corner of the world walking, laughing, and taking photos. Street performers danced and played music, and the smell of food carts mixed with the perfume of passing strangers. I stood there for a while, simply letting it all sink in, feeling small yet part of something so big. I ended the night in a small diner near my hotel. It had bright lights, red booths, and the smell of coffee and fried food. I ordered a plate of pancakes with syrup and butter, and as I ate, I thought about how much I had seen in just one day. My feet ached, but my mind was alive with images. The green peace of Central Park, the art-filled halls of the museum, the busy subways, the colorful markets of Chinatown, the sweet taste of cheesecake in Little Italy, the calm path of the High Line, and the overwhelming glow of Times Square. New York was not just one place. It was 1,000 different places woven together. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear the distant sounds of the city. It felt like a gentle heartbeat, steady and strong. I knew that tomorrow would bring even more adventures, and I was ready to see where the city would take me next. When I woke up the next morning, I felt something different. It wasn't just the excitement of seeing a new place. It was the feeling that New York had already started to change me. Didn't just give you places to look at. It gave you stories, ideas, and lessons if you paid attention. The first thing I learned was about courage. In New York, you see people chasing their dreams every day. On the sidewalks, in coffee shops, on the subway, you meet artists carrying their paintings, singers rushing to auditions, students with books and laptops working on something important. Some of them are tired, some are struggling, but they keep going. I realized that being here was like being surrounded by courage. It was as if the city whispered, "Don't give up. Keep trying." I also learned about diversity. In just one day, I could hear 10 different languages. I could eat food from 5 different countries without leaving the same street. I saw people with different skin colors, clothes, and beliefs living side by side. They didn't always agree, but somehow they made the city work. I thought about how in some places, people are afraid of differences. But in New York, differences were not something to hide. They were part of the beauty. I decided to begin my day at Central Park again, but this time I would explore deeper. The moment I stepped inside, the city noise softened, replaced by the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Sunlight streamed through the branches, creating patterns on the path. There were runners passing me, people practicing yoga on the grass, and a man feeding pigeons who gathered around his feet without fear. I followed one winding path after another, passing small lakes where ducks floated peacefully and wooden benches where elderly couples sat, quietly enjoying the morning dot. As I walked, I realized that Central Park was like a world inside another world. Place where you could forget for a moment that you were in one of the busiest cities in the world. At one point, I stopped at a small bridge that crossed a pond. The water reflected the trees and the clear blue sky above, and for a few minutes, I simply stood there, breathing in the calmness. I could have stayed all day, but New York has a way of pulling you forward, making you want to see what's next from the park. I wandered into the Upper East Side. The streets here were quieter, with elegant buildings, flower-filled balconies, and small cafes on the corners. I passed a bakery where the smell of fresh bread drifted into the street, and I couldn't resist going inside. The warmth of the place wrapped around me like a blanket, and the glass display was filled with croissants, muffins, and loaves of bread still steaming from the oven. I ordered a warm croissant and a coffee, and I sat by the window watching the street. People walked by in coats and scarves, some carrying grocery bags, others walking dogs. Everything felt peaceful yet alive, a slower rhythm than the busy heart of the city after breakfast. I made my way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The museum's steps were wide and grand, and I felt a little thrill just climbing them. Inside, the halls were filled with paintings, sculptures, and artifacts from all over the world. I wandered slowly, looking at works of art that had been created hundreds of years ago. Each piece told a story, some of kings and queens, others of ordinary life long ago. I didn't rush. I let each room pull me into its own world. There was something calming about walking through those quiet halls while outside the city rushed on. From there, I took a walk down Fifth Avenue. The street was lined with shops that sparkled with window displays, clothes, jewelry, and bright holiday decorations, even though it wasn't yet winter. I passed by St. Patrick's Cathedral, its tall spires reaching toward the sky. Standing out among the modern glass buildings around it, I stepped inside for a few minutes, and the noise of the city vanished behind the heavy doors. The air was cool, the light dim except for the colors streaming through the stained glass windows, and the space felt peaceful in a way that made me forget the world outside. In the afternoon, I decided to try something new riding the subway. The entrance was just a simple stairway leading underground. But the moment I stepped down, I entered another side of the city. The walls were lined with tiles, the air was warmer, and trains roared through the tunnels. People stood waiting, some reading books, some listening to music, some staring ahead with tired eyes. When the train arrived, the doors opened with a beep, and I stepped inside. The queue moved quickly, rocking slightly as it passed through the dark tunnels. In just a few stops, I was in another neighborhood entirely. I got off in Chinatown. The streets here were full of colorful signs, markets selling fresh vegetables and seafood, and the smell of spices in the air. I wandered through narrow lanes, where small shops sold everything from tea to hand-painted fans. The energy was different here, vibrant and full of life, with people chatting in different languages and bicycles weaving through the streets. I bought a small box of dumplings from a street vendor, and they were warm, soft, and full of flavor. I ate them as I walked, enjoying how each bite seemed to tell me a little more about the culture of the place. From Chinatown, I walked toward Little Italy. The streets here were lined with restaurants and cafes, many with tables outside under red, white, and green banners. The smell of pasta and garlic filled the air, and waiters stood outside inviting people in. I stopped at a small bakery and bought a slice of creamy cheesecake, which I ate slowly while watching the world go by. I noticed how in New York, every neighborhood had its own personality, its own sounds, smells, and colors, yet somehow they all fit together to make the city whole. By late afternoon, I decided to visit the High Line, a park built on an old railway line above the streets. Walking there felt different from the rest of the city. Plants grew along the path, and there were benches where people sat reading or talking. From above, I could see the streets stretching away in all directions, the traffic moving like rivers below. The view of the Hudson River glimmering in the sunlight was beautiful, and the cool breeze carried the scent of the water. As evening came, I made my way back toward Times Square. The closer I got, the more the streets began to glow with lights. Times Square at night was like standing in the middle of a giant screen, colors and images flashing all around. People from every corner of the world walking, laughing, and taking photos. Street performers danced and played music, and the smell of food carts mixed with the perfume of passing strangers. I stood there for a while, simply letting it all sink in. Feeling small, yet part of something so big, I ended the night in a small diner near my hotel. It had bright lights, red booths, and the smell of coffee and fried food. I ordered a plate of pancakes with syrup and butter, and as I ate, I thought about how much I had seen in just one day. My feet ached, but my mind was alive with images. The green piece of Central Park, the art-filled halls of the museum, the busy subways, the colorful markets of Chinatown, the sweet taste of cheesecake in Little Italy, the calm path of the High Line, and the overwhelming glow of Times Square. New York was not just one place. It was 1,000 different places woven together. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear the distant sounds of the city. It felt like a gentle heartbeat, steady and strong. I knew that tomorrow would bring even more adventures, and I was ready to see where the city would take me next. When I woke up the next morning, I felt something different. It wasn't just the excitement of seeing a new place. It was the feeling that New York had already started to change me. The city didn't just give you places to look at. It gave you stories, ideas, and lessons if you paid attention. The first thing I learned was about courage. In New York, you see people chasing their dreams every day. On the sidewalks, in coffee shops, on the subway, you meet artists carrying their paintings, singers rushing to auditions, students with books and laptops working on something important. Some of them are tired, some are struggling, but they keep going. I realized that being here was like being surrounded by courage. It was as if the city whispered, "Don't give up. Keep trying." I also learned about diversity. In just one day, I could hear 10 different languages. I could eat food from 5 different countries without leaving the same street. I saw people with different skin colors, clothes, and beliefs living side by side. They didn't always agree, but somehow they made the city work. I thought about how, in some places, people are afraid of differences. But in New York, differences were not something to hide. They were part of the beauty.